I never thought a single night could define my life. I never thought laughter and music could feel like knives. My name is Ethan Miller. I was 27 years old when my parents humiliated me in front of everyone at their 25th wedding anniversary. That night didn't just sting, it ignited a fire that would shape everything I became. The ballroom was enormous, chandeliers sparkling like frozen stars above, tables draped in white linen, guests dressed in designer clothes, smiling, laughing, clinking glasses. To the outside world, it was perfection. To me, it was hell. I walked in, feeling each step heavier than the last. My father's gaze found me first sharp, calculating, critical. My mother followed, her eyes cold yet precise, measuring, judging. And then there was Claire, my younger sister, glowing in a champagne-colored dress, arm linked with her fiancé, his presence commanding the room. I had tried, over the years, to meet their expectations. I had worked quietly, taken small jobs, built myself slowly, but tonight, their approval was irrelevant. Tonight, I was invisible, or worse, an object of ridicule. The speeches began. Friends and relatives toasted my parents, praising the life they had built and the children they had raised. Names were mentioned, all except mine. Every word of admiration for my siblings was a silent reminder of what I was not. And then, my father picked up the microphone. "We are proud of the paths our children have chosen," he said. His eyes briefly met mine, sharp as a blade. Though not everyone seems to take full advantage of the opportunities they are given. Laughter erupted around the room. Murmurs, snickers. I felt it like a punch to the chest. Every whisper, every glance, every chuckle reminded me I had failed, at least in their eyes. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I didn't flee. I simply stood there, every heartbeat pounding, every breath heavy with humiliation. Later, my mother approached. Calm, composed, her voice ice wrapped in silk. "You could have tried harder," she said, almost casually. "You could have done more to meet your potential." I looked at her, really looked. The woman who had held me as a child now saw me as a disappointment, not a son. "I came to celebrate you," I said quietly. Her sigh cut deeper than words. "And yet you embarrassed us," she replied. I left before dessert. No dramatic exit, no confrontation. Just walked out, leaving the glittering ballroom and all its approval behind. Outside, the night was cold. Streetlights flickered across the empty streets. The city moved around me, oblivious. For the first time, I felt free. The next morning, I woke in a small motel at the edge of the city. Bare walls, a thin mattress, a flickering lamp, perfect anonymity. No one expected anything of me. No one judged me. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text Claire. The world had already decided my worth. Now, it was my turn. I started small. Delivery jobs, cleaning offices, working nights, learning by day. I read everything I could about business, finance, human psychology, and success. Every story of someone underestimated became my blueprint. Every failure I witnessed became a lesson. Months passed. Every paycheck, no matter how small, felt like a brick in a foundation I was building a fortress where no one could belittle me. The boy humiliated in that ballroom slowly began to disappear. In his place, a quiet determination grew. A fire that would not be extinguished by ridicule or rejection. By the end of the first year, I had saved enough to move into a tiny apartment. A desk, a small kitchen, a bed. Mine. No family to judge. No whispers to haunt me. Only silence and space to grow. Then, I began investing. Small ventures at first. I studied markets, observed human behavior, learned patience. The failures were brutal. Every mistake was a reminder that the world didn't reward kindness, effort, or familial loyalty. It rewarded preparation, intelligence, and timing. I kept going, relentlessly, quietly, unnoticed. I wasn't working for their approval anymore, I was working for me. The occasional sight of Claire on social media stung at first. The perfect life, the engagement, the celebrations I wasn't a part of. But slowly, those pangs transformed into fuel. Fuel to rise, fuel to succeed, fuel to one day be someone they could never ignore. By the second year, my ventures were growing. Small contracts, reliable clients, steady income. But more importantly, my confidence grew. My understanding of the world's cruel truths sharpened. I wasn't going to confront anyone. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to become untouchable. The night I received a message from my mother inviting me to their 30th wedding anniversary, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel anxiety. I felt power. Not yet exposed, not yet celebrated, but undeniable. I smiled at my phone. They had called me back into their world, expecting the same old boy. They had no idea what they were about to witness, and that was perfect. Leaving that hotel ballroom didn't feel like liberation at first. It felt like stepping into a world that had no space for me. A world where I could start over, but only if I shed everything I had been. The first few nights, I stayed in a small, cheap motel on the edge of the city. A single bed, a desk with peeling paint, a flickering lamp, perfect anonymity. No questions, no judgment, no reminders of humiliation. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text Claire. I didn't want to hear apologies I knew wouldn't come. The world had already decided my value. It was time I determined it for myself. I worked every job I could find. Delivery shifts, nights, cleaning offices, anything that paid a few dollars. Exhaustion became a companion, a reminder that nothing worth building comes easily. Every drop of sweat, every ache, every exhausted step was a seed I planted for the life I would create. I spent my days studying relentlessly. Business strategies, market trends, human behavior, the stories of people who had climbed from nothing to wealth, influence, and respect became my blueprint. Every setback became a lesson. Every small victory became proof that I could survive and eventually thrive. Months passed. My body ached constantly. My mind was stretched to its limits. I missed home sometimes. Not my parents, but the comfort of familiarity. And then I reminded myself, familiarity had cost me dignity. Humiliation had been the price of staying, and I had refused to pay it again. The boy who had been shamed, dismissed, and ignored began to disappear. In his place, a quiet fire was growing. Determination, focus, strategy, patience. By the end of the first year, I had enough to rent a tiny apartment of my own. Bare walls, a small kitchen, a desk, a bed. Every corner of that space belonged to me. Every night I fell asleep knowing I had made it on my own. No family, no approval, no pity, just survival and the first taste of freedom. Then came the turning point. Small investments, not flashy or reckless, but calculated. I studied markets, observed people, analyzed trends. Mistakes were harsh teachers, but I learned patience, strategy, and how to recognize opportunities before anyone else did. The second year brought growth. I built a client base, took on small business contracts, learned negotiation, finance, and the subtle art of influence. Every success, no matter how minor, fueled me. Every failure reminded me that no one owed me anything, not my parents, not society, not the world. Through it all, I rarely looked back. Claire appeared occasionally in my social media feed, engaged, smiling, perfect. I felt a pang at first, but it quickly transformed into something stronger. Resolve. If she was living her perfect life, so be it. I had my own life to build, and I would make it so extraordinary that even she could not ignore it. By the third year, the transformation was undeniable. I no longer feared failure. I no longer sought approval. I was building something real, solid, unshakable. Small ventures turned into larger ones. I formed partnerships. I invested wisely. I made decisions that would have seemed impossible to the boy who had been humiliated months before. And then, one evening, A message appeared on my phone. From my mother. "We are planning our 30th wedding anniversary. We would love for you to attend." I stared at the screen. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just the expectation of my presence. I smiled faintly. Not because I wanted to see them, but because now I had a choice. The boy they had humiliated would have crumbled under the expectation. The man I was becoming could choose to walk in or walk away. Every step I took from that moment onward was deliberate. Every choice, every investment, every strategy had been building toward this. A life they could not ignore. A presence that could not be dismissed. Revenge, I had learned, isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. Revenge is quiet, relentless, unstoppable, and inevitable. By the time the anniversary arrived, I had grown into a figure whose absence had been unnoticed, but whose return would command attention. A man whose power was quiet, but undeniable. The boy who had been humiliated was gone. The man I had built in silence had arrived. I had spent 3 years in silence. 3 years building a life that no one had expected. 3 years preparing to step back into the world that had tried to erase me. The invitations arrived weeks before my parents' 30th wedding anniversary. My mother's message was polite, precise, calculated. "We hope you can join us for this milestone celebration. Your presence would mean a lot." I didn't respond immediately. I wanted them to wonder. I wanted the anticipation to build. They had underestimated me before. Now, I wanted them to feel the weight of that misjudgment. The night arrived. The hotel ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, polished floors reflecting the warm golden light, guests mingling with laughter that hid secrets of privilege and expectation. It was familiar. It was intimidating. And it was exactly what I needed. I walked in, not rushed, not dramatic, calm, poised, confident. For a moment, no one noticed me. And then, as my father's eyes fell on me, I saw at the flicker of recognition, the subtle crack in his composed facade. My mother's smile stiffened, her posture rigid, a silent acknowledgement of the boy she had once humiliated and dismissed. Claire, my sister, paused mid-conversation. Her eyes widened. The girl who had once ignored me, who had lived her life expecting my absence, now realized that the boy she thought small had become a man impossible to overlook. I didn't rush to greet anyone. I didn't seek acknowledgement. I simply walked to the edge of the room, surveying the crowd. Conversations paused. Murmurs followed me, whispers of curiosity. People who had never noticed me before were now silently acknowledging my presence. Dinner commenced. Toasts were made. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed. And all the while, I remained quiet, letting my presence speak volumes. The boy humiliated in that ballroom years ago would have fumbled. The man I had become commanded attention without uttering a single boast. Eventually, my parents approached, their politeness strained. "Ethan, we're glad you could join us," my father said, voice carefully measured. "It's important for family to celebrate together." I nodded slightly, my gaze steady. "I came on my terms," I replied softly. "Not because anyone demanded it." My mother's lips pressed together, almost a reflexive attempt to regain control. But her silence was louder than any reprimand she could have issued. My existence, my calm authority, my quiet power, it spoke louder than words ever could. Claire approached next. Her eyes were hesitant, searching, unsure how to address the boy she had once known as a background figure in her life. You've changed," she whispered, voice tinged with awe and something unspoken. I simply nodded. No pride, no gloating, just acknowledgement. I had changed. She could see it. They all could. As the evening continued, I noticed the subtle shifts, glances, exchanged behind polite smiles, conversations that faltered when I entered the room, the tension that now underpinned every toast. The people who had dismissed me, the ones who had assumed I would remain insignificant, could no longer ignore the fact that I had grown beyond their comprehension. Revenge had never been about shouting. It had never been about confrontation. It had been built quietly, patiently, relentlessly in every late night, every failure endured, every lesson learned. By the end of the evening, My parents and siblings were faced with a truth they couldn't articulate. The boy they had humiliated was gone. The man they now saw was impossible to dismiss. And I hadn't even spoken my full story yet. That night, walking back to my apartment, I realized something essential. Revenge doesn't need chaos. It doesn't need drama. It simply needs presence, strength, persistence, and the patience to allow the world to catch up to you. I had arrived at the edge of recognition. The next step would be exposure, the final act of quiet triumph. By the time the night of my parents' 30th wedding anniversary arrived, everything had been meticulously prepared, not in the form of schemes or traps, but in the quiet power I had built over the past 3 years. Every decision, every late night, every risk had led me here. The hotel ballroom shimmered under chandeliers. Guests mingled, laughter and music blending into a polished hum of celebration. And there I was, standing at the entrance, calm, poised, unshakable. For a moment, no one noticed. Then my father's eyes found me. A subtle flinch, almost imperceptible, betrayed his awareness. My mother's smile stiffened. Her hand, previously relaxed at her side, now tensed slightly. Claire froze mid-step, her eyes widening. I didn't rush to greet anyone. I didn't seek acknowledgement. I simply walked, each step deliberate, each movement confident, each breath measured. The whispers began almost immediately. Guests murmured among themselves, subtle glances cast in my direction. No one spoke to me yet, but everyone noticed. The boy they had dismissed had returned as a man impossible to ignore. Dinner began. Toasts were made. Glasses clinked. And all the while, I remained silent, observant, present. Every glance I received, every reaction I noticed, all pieces of a puzzle I had been assembling silently. Eventually, my father approached, his posture rigid, voice measured. "Ethan, we're glad you could attend. Family should celebrate milestones together." I looked at him steadily, calmly, evenly. "I came because I wanted to," I replied. No bitterness, no malice, just truth. My mother's eyes narrowed, her lips parted, perhaps to scold or remind me of past humiliations, but I didn't allow it. My presence, quiet and undeniable, conveyed everything I had worked for, everything I had endured. Claire approached next, the girl I had once known, the sister who had believed my absence would remain permanent, now stared at me with cautious awe. "You look different," she said softly, a mixture of surprise and recognition in her voice. I nodded. No pride, no gloating, just acknowledgement. I had changed. My growth, my patience, my relentless pursuit of success, all visible in every subtle gesture, every confident step, every controlled word. Throughout the evening, the tension grew. Polite conversations faltered. Eyes followed me. Whispers floated. People who had dismissed me, ignored me, or laughed at me in the past now found themselves confronted with a presence they could not dismiss. Revenge had never required confrontation. It did not need loud accusations or dramatic speeches. It required patience, resilience, and the strength to let your life itself become the answer. By the end of the night, my parents and siblings were forced to confront a truth they could not deny. The boy they humiliated had evolved into a man they could no longer ignore, and this silent victory, built over years of struggle and persistence, was far more powerful than any outburst could have been. Walking back to my apartment that night, I realized revenge isn't about spectacle. It isn't about forcing acknowledgement. It's about becoming so complete, so powerful, that the world, whether it likes it or not, has to see you. And I had done exactly that. Months passed since the anniversary. The subtle power I had displayed had already left its mark. Conversations about me circulated quietly among relatives, family, friends, and colleagues. I had arrived as a presence no one could dismiss. And yet, my ultimate victory was still ahead. By now, my businesses had grown beyond what my parents could imagine. Investments across multiple cities, partnerships with influential figures, recognition in circles that had once seemed unreachable. I had become the man they never thought I could be, not because they had doubted me, but because they had chosen to ignore me. And then came Claire's wedding. My sister, radiant in her white dress, marrying a man whose name had once been a symbol of success in their eyes. Their lives were perfect, curated, untouchable. And yet, for the first time, I felt a quiet satisfaction in my chest. I arrived at the venue unnoticed at first. A subtle entry. Just a man walking confidently into a room filled with people who thought they had already defined him. As I entered, eyes turned, murmurs spread. My parents froze. They expected compliance, a muted presence. They had no idea that the boy they had shamed, the son they had dismissed, had become someone who could not be overlooked. I did not approach them. I did not demand acknowledgement. I simply watched, calm and composed, as the ceremony unfolded. Every glance I received from guests carried the silent weight of recognition. People who had once laughed at me now found themselves pausing, reconsidering, acknowledging my existence without a word spoken. After the ceremony, gifts were exchanged. When Claire opened mine, she froze. A carefully chosen token, simple in appearance but immensely valuable, symbolized not just my presence but the journey I had endured. The years of struggle, the nights spent building, the silent victories, all conveyed in a single gesture. She looked at me, eyes wide, voice caught in disbelief. "Ethan, how?" I smiled faintly. Not proudly, not arrogantly, just a quiet acknowledgement. She understood not everything needs to be shouted, not everything needs words. Sometimes, life itself tells the story. My parents approached, trying to maintain composure. Their eyes betrayed them a mixture of shock, realization, and something unspoken. Regret. "You've done well," my father said, voice tight. I nodded. No reply necessary. The man they had dismissed had built an empire of patience, resilience, and persistence. My presence, my achievements, my calm authority spoke louder than anything I could have said. That night, I left the wedding without fanfare. No dramatic exit, no speeches, just the quiet satisfaction of a life reclaimed, a future secured, a past reconciled not through vengeance, but through becoming the person I was always meant to be. In the quiet of my car, driving away from the celebration, I understood the final truth. Revenge is not about humiliation. It is not about shaming those who wronged you. It is about transformation. It is about building a life so complete, so undeniable, that the world, even those who doubted you most, cannot ignore it. And in that silence, in that quiet triumph, I had won everything.